All right, shall we start? Excellent. Okay, so first I want to say hello to all of our friends online who are watching us on the playback. We are now jumping into session 4 of Infinite Relationships of a Jewish Woman. And of course, as you now know, the entire focus of this 6-part session is learning how to unleash our own inner greatness so that we can elevate and transform the ones we love. So let's do a very quick recap. So in session 1, we defined our relationship map, meaning understanding we need to know where we're started, where we're headed, and how to have a very clear plan of getting from point A to point B. In session 2, we conducted a self-analysis so that we could really define our starting point and understanding that 99.99% of the work is with me, and it always will be. Okay, we of course talked about the fact that there are special exceptions when you're dealing with active addiction or narcissism or other extreme situations where there are abuse or other things that of course those are not a normal situation, and first priority is to keep you and your family safe, but those are of course the exception to the rule and not the rule. So we talked about learning to discern the difference between actual trauma versus ongoing drama and how to decide to navigate between the two. Then last session, in session 3, we started the conversation on creating a strategic plan for revolutionizing the relationships with your family members and your loved ones. And we covered 4 main concepts. Okay, I'm not going to quiz you on what they were because it's been 2 whole weeks since then and there is no way we could remember without having to clear the cobwebs. So let's go through them really quickly. Number 1, it's never too late. Never too late to cross even the deepest abyss. Number 2, good is the enemy of great. Now, this is a bit of a dichotomy because in business there's a concept which is done is better than perfect. Okay, and that is true especially for people like me who are recovering perfectionists, which means that we're always stressing for everything to be perfect and we can't pull the trigger until everything is actually perfect. That is a different concept, and I want to be clear on that. That is a very different concept from good versus great. What we're talking about in good versus great is the quality of your relationships or the quality of an organization or the quality of a team. We're not talking about a project. We're talking about your relationships and the level at which you thrive as a family, a team, a business, etc., and how the disease of mediocrity is plaguing the Western world. Everybody with me on that?
Yes.
The difference there. Okay, great. And then number 4, the 4th concept was transforming from reactionary to strategic conversations. So instead of living constantly on our automatic responses where we just react from like the, animal brain. Fight or flight, exactly. So instead what we're learning how to do is we're learning how to pause. And in that pause, exactly, reflect, analyze, and think through what is the wisest and what is the more elevated way to respond from my higher self instead of from my lower self. Okay, so that brings us up to where we are today. And today we're going to talk about using personality styles and love languages to transform our relationships. But before we get into that, I want to circle back to our strategic plan from last session, and moving from session 3 to session 4, I want to establish a few baseline fundamentals when it comes to using your wisdom and discernment as a woman to strategically create rich and meaningful relationships with the people, of course, that you love the most in this world. Okay, so one of the most foundational laws of leadership is that you cannot lead someone that you need. Okay, I'm gonna say it again. This is like leadership 101. you cannot lead someone that you need. And an extension of that is that you cannot love someone that you need. Okay, first time I heard this, like, what? Why? Because what we're really doing there is loving ourselves.
It's attachment.
Yes, it is attachment, and there are so many unhealthy forms of attachment. And if I truly love someone, I love them from a place where I am not making decisions based on how it's going to affect me. I am making decisions based on what is truly and wholly best for them, and I have removed myself from it as a player in this dynamic. So, what does that mean? When I'm saying the work is with me, and when, like I shared with you that my teacher from Israel said to me 10 years back, and I've been really working on it for 10 years since, and I'm still not there yet. I probably fail more in this than anything else, is that whatever is going on with you has nothing to do with me. Absolutely nothing. And that's where the work is with me comes from, because it is just natural. It's a law of entanglement with human relationships, is that we do weave ourselves together. We braid ourselves together, and we try to, all of a sudden, we don't even realize that we're doing it, but it's like we're playing chess, and we're not even playing chess consciously. This whole thing is happening below the surface, and we're trying to figure out, how do I protect myself in the midst of everything else happening around me? And this is ego in its rawest, purest form. Because the entire thing with ego is self-preservation and self-protection. Okay? And we are wired in our ego, which of course is like our animal soul. Our lowest state, if you look at like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, first, food, water, shelter, right? Then you have to have safety, and then feeling loved, and then, all the other things coming above that, self-actualization, et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole order here, and I didn't go even into all the different levels, but when you're looking at the ego's need, once you have food, water, shelter, which is like your basic animal state, right above that is feeling safe. And the ego will work overtime to move you away from pain and toward pleasure. So whenever I'm in an uncomfortable situation at all, ego is going eject, 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 eject in whatever way possible. And again, depending on personality type, that might be fight, flight, or freeze. We have different response mechanisms there. But what we have to understand is that if I truly love them for them, I can rise above all of this. I can detangle myself from the situation and say, I love you. I am not waiting on you. I am going to continue moving forward. I have no resentment. I have no blame. I have no judgment. Now, y'all, we are talking high level, a lot of work, but we're talking like in the most objective place. Okay, this is what is possible when I realize I cannot love someone that I need. I cannot lead people that I need. So in business and leadership, when you're leading a team, even if it's a nonprofit or a softball league or whatever it is, we say we love everyone, we wait on no one. Okay, which means the train is moving in this direction. You decide, are you on or are you off? We're going to do everything we can to keep you with us and keep us on board. But the best thing we can do for the whole train is to keep the train moving, right? Now, here's how we break this apart, okay? How we really break this down. We are all leaders. You are leading a household. You are leading a family. You are leading yourself, which I think is the toughest one. by the way, okay? Because we all have this desire to be mothered, to be taken care of. We want this knight in shining armor, this prince on the white horse to come along and rescue us. There is no prince. There is no white horse, okay? You have to be your own Princess Charming and learn how to rescue yourself. But how can I say unequivocally that every single person watching this video is a leader? John Maxwell, who is probably considered one of the foremost industry leaders on leadership, is very famous for a certain phrase. He says, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. What does this mean? This means that in any situation, if you are needing to influence someone, that is leadership. Okay, and we're going to talk about why that is in a second, because in any conversation, someone is influencing and someone is being influenced, correct? Now, let's break this down from a conversation from leadership and a business perspective. Let's look at our spouse and our kids for a second, okay? First of all, something I learned a number of years ago, I don't remember where I heard it from, which book I read it in first, but it was a big game changer for me. And it was one of the Rabbanim, somewhere along the way, one of the modern day sages. It wasn't from like back in the olden day, but it was an interpretation. And they were saying, if you're not treating your spouse as the most special person in the world, there will not be bracha in your home. There will not be blessings in your life. And like, oh my gosh, woo, okay. This one is definitely not always easy to do. And it is not at all natural in the Western world, okay? It's very natural in other parts of the world where we're like, yeah, because the women are suppressed. Like, we really struggle with this one, okay? But there is a law of human nature that's called matching and mirroring. And when we treat our spouse like a king, then most of the time they respond with treating us like a queen and vice versa. Okay? When you treat someone with kindness, they typically respond with kindness. When you lead with a smile, that's the way our sages say, be the first to smile on the street. That is leadership. That is you creating and affecting your environment. Now, again, if you're dealing with a narcissist or an addict or someone that is in an abusive situation, this won't necessarily be the case, but those situations are the exception to the rule. Okay, and last session, we spoke in detail about how we as women can take the lead in our home, if necessary, on inviting and allowing our men to grow along with us while still giving them the space and grace to move at their own pace and in their own style. And that requires discernment to be able to do that. Okay? So if we're going to think about how do we do that, if I know that we gave this analogy, I think it was last week. Y'all can correct me if I'm wrong. But how the man may be the head, but the woman turns the neck, right? Yeah. Okay, so in this same situation where there's always gonna be ebb and flow, especially in a married couple, where it's sometimes, and even sometimes in different departments of the household. Some areas you'll lead, some areas he'll lead, some areas you'll take, the reins here, and sometimes I'm supposed to be in charge here, but I'm losing it at the moment. And so my spouse has to come along and pick up the reins for me. And this is the ebb and flow of a relationship over the long term. But if we're talking about the curve of our upward trajectory of how we want to be moving, in the long, slow haul, then if that's the case, we can realize that even if I'm in a situation where maybe my husband is quote unquote leading this area, I am still responsible as the female energy of the home to make sure that we are going on the right path, right? That's where our women's wisdom comes in. And that's where if we sometimes, the best with people love an idea that they think is theirs, right? So sometimes we have to get smart at how to plant seeds, how to plant ideas, how to ask open-ended questions and invite others to join us. Because if we're communicating anything in a way that's belittling, it's never going to be received, right? And that's a whole conversation. Actually, I think we're doing communication in session 5. But right now, we're just talking about how if they're creating an energy in our home where there's bracha. And like our sages say, is that if we are not treating our spouse like a king or a queen, like our most favorite, most prized, coveted possession in the world, there will not be the flow of blessings that we're looking for in our home. And every single one of us can do an inventory. I can do one almost on a daily basis. Y'all, I kid you not. I have to make myself notes on my phone, be nice to husband. I kid you not. Like, okay, I know I want to do it, but in the rush of the day, I forget. Or the tasks or the stress or whatever. And it can sometimes be a week before I was like, oh man, I forgot to be nice. Okay? And so I have to literally put myself reminders daily of things that I want to do to be purposeful and intentional with that energy, not because I'm a raging lunatic most of the time, but because we just get busy and we get swept away with whatever is the drama that's constantly popping up, okay? Now, what about our kids? Okay, last session, you asked yourself, what memories and experiences do I want to create for my kiddos while they're in my home, right? Once they're gone from home, what do I want them to remember? How do I want them to feel? How do I want them to look back on their time with me? And the Frediker Rebbe, who was the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, actually gave a mandate to all of his Hasidim, all of his students. He said, we should spend 30 minutes daily reflecting on Hinuch, reflecting on the education of our children, how we want to educate them. And this, by the way, doesn't stop when they graduate and move out. The Rebbe says this should continue even when they leave our home as adults.
Really?
Yes. That we can be thinking about how do we continue to, and now the dynamics change. Okay, we're not smother mother anymore at that point. Hopefully that stopped way before, but we still, it becomes a shift, but it's still thinking through how can I support them through their next phase of life? How can I help prepare them and equip them? And sometimes it's waiting until we're needed, okay, because help isn't help where it's not wanted. But when we can invest in creating a relationship of trust with our children, then they will always come back to us. And the number 3 top best ways to lead, without question, by example, and by example. So when we are just realizing that our whole life is leadership for our children, they're absorbing everything, even when they don't mean to be. How do we know? In 10 years, watch what comes out of their mouth. It's our words. And this, and almost every recent parenting class will tell you, we have to be so careful with our words to our children, not because if we are repeatedly critical and harsh with them, that they end up hating us. What happens is they end up hating themselves because we become their inner voice. Okay, now they may not love us and be happy with how we're speaking to them, but it internalizes to self-criticism so easily. Okay, now these concepts that we're talking about here are lifelong projects. Okay, they are not overnight fixes. And if we truly want to transform our relationships and feel true love and peace and fulfillment in our home, y'all, it's a big job. Okay, and what this means is that we've got to eliminate this disease of microwave mentality. Okay, we've got to stop just skimming the surface of life.
Quick fix.
Yes, and we've got to choose to dig deeper. Life is not a one-size-fits-all formula. So what this means is that it's our job as the leader, and that's how we have to start seeing ourselves. Not just mom, not just taxi driver, not just, housekeeper and cook and events coordinator, which we for sure are, all of those things full time, okay? But even higher level than that is the leader of this tribe. So what that means is that we've got to be willing to really dig deep and take ownership of customizing our situation in a way that works for us. Okay, I'll give you an example. I was talking with a group of very high performing female entrepreneurs earlier this week, and they were giving examples of how some of the most freeing things they have done for themselves and for their families in the last couple of years is choosing to unplug from belief systems that we've just absorbed from society. I'll give you like a couple of crazy examples, okay? One, she said these are, by the way, non-Jewish women, okay? Actually, I take that back, half. One of them, the non-Jewish woman, says she stopped sleeping in the same bedroom as her husband. And everyone was like, well, how are you together? How do you spend quality time? How are you intimate? Da, da, da. She's like, what do you mean? We do it whenever we want, But they couldn't sleep. He's waking up at a certain time. She's waking up at a certain time. The breathing, the sounds, the smells, it was just not working, and they have fairly young children. Their kids are 5 and 7. And she's like, when it doesn't work for us anymore, we'll change it. But right now, our house has the best energy it's ever had because we just decided to get creative and experiment until we found something that worked for us. Another family, they took the finances off of one person that had been carrying it for their entire time and put the finances in the hands of the other person. And she said, I grew up my entire life thinking the man has to manage the money. It's what my dad did. So she always thought the man manages money. And then I realized I married a man who was a terrible money manager, drove us into the ground. So I realized that if I'm a bit OCD, I'm a super freak. So we just started thinking about how are we going to strategically take on the roles in our home instead of just falling into the roles in our home based on what we see everyone else doing. And these are just 2 very simple examples, but I came home that night and I started thinking through, how many things do we do just because it's the way they've always been done? Yeah.
I have such a good one.
Oh, tell us.
For years, my husband and I have been fighting and arguing because I needed him to be the handyman in the house.
Okay.
And he's a programmer. He
Wow.
can't change a light bulb. And
Wow.
every time he would procrastinate or wouldn't do it, it would become a huge fight.
Yeah.
Until one day I said, I'm not going to hold resentment for who my husband is.
Yeah.
This was a huge awakening for me. And I became the handyman.
Wow.
And I'm good
Wow.
at it.
Wow.
And
Amazing.
so now I never expect him to do anything.
Wow. That is so good.
Yeah.
That is a great
Huge
example.
one, yes.
Amazing. That's really good. Okay, I love it. So, what are we learning here? What do we take away from this? Do y'all know the story about the Chinese bamboo tree? So, the Chinese bamboo tree is a very powerful metaphor here. So, for the first several years of the life of this bamboo tree, I think it's usually 5 to 7 years, after you plant the seed, you see nothing. 0 visible signs of growth above ground. Okay, but however, during this time, what's happening is the tree is actually growing this entire network of roots below the surface. You don't see anything that happens. Then all of a sudden, literally within a matter of weeks, the bamboo tree shoots up and something like 80 feet in a matter of weeks. And not just a weak little flimsy thing, but it has the foundation and the root network to be able to sustain the growth after that, okay? So there are a few lessons here. First of all, growth often happens beneath the surface. We can't see it, and we just have to trust the process, because the fact that we can't see it with our physical eyes doesn't mean that it's not necessarily happening. Okay, second thing here is that faith and persistence are key. So just like we're nurturing a little seed, success requires consistency. Whether it's with your health, your finances, your relationships, anything we're wanting to do, even when it seems like nothing is happening, the single most important thing we can give is consistency. Okay? And then last but not least, when the time is right, growth can be exponential. Why? Because you've invested in the soil, right? And then that's when all of your unseen effort beneath the surface pays off with these visible transformational results. Okay? That's why also when people are sometimes working on a new diet or a new health, fitness routine, you're like, man, I've been working on this for weeks and I haven't seen anything. And all of a sudden, in a matter of a week or two, you can see
new person.
Yeah. And everybody's like, oh, what have you been doing? Like, oh, finally. Okay? So, with that foundation, I said, so we gave a recap from session 3, then we had to circle back and to transition from session 3 into session 4, we have to have these fundamentals in place, okay? So session 4 is, as you already know, it's about personality styles and love languages. What this means is that we must learn to speak their language.
There's a book.
Okay, there is. Well, there's a lot of them actually. Okay.
I'm reading it now. The 5 languages
Yes.
of love.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. We're gonna touch on that very quickly today. Okay. But before we do that, we need to talk about the universal languages that everyone speaks. Okay, everyone needs these pieces to feel safe, understood, and validated. And when we can infuse our relationships with this lifeblood, literally think of it as lifeblood. When your blood is healthy, when your blood is strong, you can get a cold, you can get sick, you can catch a bug, and you can overcome it quickly. You can fight back. Okay, same thing in your relationships. These bumps in the road that we all experience will be manageable. So I'm going to give you 4. Okay? Number 1, everyone has a sign around their neck that says, make me feel important. Okay? You know the old saying, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care? Mm-hmm. This is such a fundamental layer. And this, by the way, this is why the number 1 rule of sales is to always show up with a gift. Okay? Why? Because you're showing that you care. You're taking the time, not just some stupid thing you picked up, on the way, but a thoughtful gift, something that's meaningful, because it breaks down so many barriers and it sends a message of, I took the time to stop and learn about you, to care about you. And so in any relationship with your spouse, your kids, your parents, your in-laws, when we can understand everyone has a sign around their neck that says, make me feel important. And until that person feels validated, they're not fully engaged in whatever you're trying to do, in anything you're trying to accomplish. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, people support what they help to create. Okay, now this is what I was gently trying to refer to a minute ago, that if we want our kids to think it's the best idea ever, help them come up with the idea instead of giving them the idea. And as parents, we can ask leading questions to do that. We can do that in a committee meeting. We can do that with our parents, with our spouse. We can do it with anybody. We don't have to be the one that always, is the genius. We don't have to be so concerned with looking smart that everyone else feels lesser around us. In fact, that's one of the greatest signs of leadership, is that you can shine the light on other people instead of needing the limelight for yourself. So in every transaction, somebody's selling and somebody's buying, right? In every conversation, someone's leading and someone's following. Someone is influencing and someone is being influenced. And that's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean you always have to be the seller. It doesn't mean you always have to be the buyer. It doesn't mean you always have to be the leader. Again, a great rule of strong leadership is knowing how to also be a great follower, because you're not always the leader. Sometimes you're the leader, sometimes you're the follower. So it's not a bad thing or a good thing, it's just a fact. And we have to be able to see that happening around us so that we have the wisdom of how to move in and out of these different roles in different situations. Y'all with me on this?
Yeah.
Okay, so people support what they help to create. This is called the law of buy-in. So if I want to move my family from point A to point B, if I want to get them on board on a certain family vacation, if I want to get them on board on moving homes, if I want to get them on board on any new plan where there is always going to be resistance because people don't like change.
No.
Okay? So we have to think through this law of buy-in and go through each one of them together in our minds and think, what's in it for them? How can I create buy-in with them? What would make them excited about this so I can speak their language? Now, sometimes it means I have to go to each member of the committee, meaning my life committee, which is my family, okay? And I have to go to each member of the committee and get their buy-in one at a time. Only then can I bring the whole committee together, because if I bring them all together at once, then they're going to gang up against me and revolt, because I didn't invest the time in that one-on-one relationship first. Make sense? Okay. By the way, have y'all ever heard this concept of the life committee?
No.
So each person has an invisible committee that sits on our life. And most of the time, all these people end up on our committee without being invited. There was not, okay? There was not a formal invitation process to this committee. All of a sudden, we look around at the people who are actually voting on our life choices, and we're like, what the heck are you doing at the table? How did you get here? Okay, and then we have to figure out how to replace the committee, okay? Doing that strategically and gently and discreetly. Sometimes it's just choosing to shift certain conversations, okay? I don't have to ask everyone's opinion, but it's something that everyone loves to give freely, especially women, okay? All right, number 3. So first is everyone has a sign around the neck, make me feel important, right? Universal language. Number 2, people support what they help to create. Number 3, when a cat is backed into a corner, they always come out hissing and clawing. Always. So if our loved ones feel attacked by us, they will always respond in the same way. Now, depending on their personality style, they will show it in different ways. So their version of, self-defense, clawing and trying to get out of that feeling backed into a corner, they will show it in different ways. So again, this is where fight, flight, freeze comes in, and but no matter how they respond based on their personality, they will absolutely shut down and put up walls to you, and any hope of meaningful conversation or collaboration will be gone. Not happening. It is absolutely dead in that moment. Okay? So what that means is that we've got to learn how to approach every conversation with empathy, with collaboration, and assuming the best in the other person. We've got to drop every ounce of aggression, sarcasm. Oh my gosh, it's so toxic and poisonous in communication. So we've got to drop the aggression, the sarcasm, accusation, any drop of blame, forget it. The claws are back out. Okay? That is if we want them to hear us and be a collaborative part of the conversation. My husband used to say to me, Hyatt, do you want to win or do you want to be right? I have a very strong sense of justice. So when I feel right or wrong, I want to come out as mama bear, even if I'm not the mama. Okay? But when he's asking this question, by the way, I want to clarify in this sense, when he's saying, do you want to win or do you want to be right? Winning doesn't mean you versus them. Winning doesn't mean you beat them.
No, it's me being smart.
Right? It means you win together. You create unity, and you bring a state of unison back into the relationship. Okay? And then the last one, number 4, is apologies and affirmations. Now, we're going to unpack both of these more in the last 2 sessions, but I want to touch on them quickly here because they are critical. These are 2 surefire ways to bring someone's walls down if you've had anything to do with why the walls are up to begin with, okay? So apologies, okay, obviously, clearly, we must be willing to apologize, genuinely being the key word, for our part of the mess, okay? I read, I think just today, you know, the first to apologize is the bravest. The first to forgive is the strongest. And the first to forget is the happiest.
Can you repeat that?
Yes. The first to apologize is the bravest, for sure. Because I'm not like, I'm not going to, you know, when we have this, you know, all the reasons why we're right in our mind. Okay? So first to apologize is the bravest. First to forgive is the strongest. And the first to forget is the happiest. So, again, a genuine apology is one of the fastest ways to endear someone to us if we have been a part of creating the divide, okay? And we're gonna talk more about genuine apologies in a later session, but there's just one quick point I want to make here. Any apology with the word but in it is not a genuine apology, right?
You need to send him.
We'll all watch it together, okay? Or how about this one? I'm sorry if I hurt you. I'm sorry if I made you mad.
Offended.
I'm sorry if you got offended by what I said.
Yes.
Okay?
I'm sorry.
Not
if you
enough.
got
Okay. There is
there.
no ownership in
Like
those
it.
statements, okay? But that is our way of going, I know I should apologize, but I'm not ready yet. That's what that means, okay? That's apologizing out of obligation, not out of a desire for true connection. Okay? And then affirmation, right? So we said apologies and affirmation. So to build up and affirm someone, that's what I mean by affirmation in this context, okay? So affirming what you see good in them, affirming what you believe is important and meaningful in them, affirming why you need their support, affirming how and why teamwork and synergy are stronger when you work together. Okay, building them up in a way that they see that you look up to them. They are, even if it's your kids, you admire things about them and you appreciate things about them and you're validating this in them, and that is filling their bucket to where they can be heard again. Okay? So these are the 4 components of universal language that everyone speaks and understands. And remember that everybody needs these elements to feel safe, understood, and validated. Okay? Now let's look at learning to speak to the individual unique language of each of the people in your life that are most important to you. So first we're gonna look at personality styles, and then we're gonna look at their love languages. By the way, quick disclaimer, both of these topics are entire courses in themselves, okay? So of course there is no way we're gonna do an exhaustive study on these in 20 minutes. But what I wanna do instead is give you an overview of how and why all these pieces fit together and how they're so critical for the relationship map, this end game that we're wanting to create. And then you can decide how and where, based on your particular situation right now, that you need to dig deeper based on the circumstances and needs of what you're wanting to create. Okie doke? So, personality styles. So, gosh, there are so many different flavors and versions and takes on personality styles. I'm sure you've heard of Myers-Briggs is a big one. Okay, Myers-Briggs, you end up with a 4-letter code that summarizes your personality. It's very in-depth and beautiful, but unless you live it every day, it's also very easy to forget it because it's very complicated, okay? If you are in a situation where, let's say you're in HR, okay, or you're needing to be dissecting people all day, it's a very good thing to know how to read people and work with them and lead them along the way. But for everyday use, I find it a bit cumbersome. Okay, there is another great one that is called the 4-color personality code. Not sure if y'all are familiar with this one, but it's your red, blue, green, or yellow. You fall into a quadrant, and most people are a combination. We end up looking like a rainbow. Okay, it's also strong, but my personal favorite is DISC, D-I-S-C, the DISC personality assessment. And I'm going to share it with you right now in a very abbreviated nutshell. Okay, and then I'm going to share with you some tools on how to use this with your spouse, with your parents, your family members, your kiddos, in a work environment. Okay, so D-I-S-C, write these letters down. If you're taking notes, write these letters down. D-I-S-C.
C.
Okay, yep, disc. Okay, so D is dominant. Okay, you don't have to write all these words down because you can go back and listen to the replay, but just get the main word for each quadrant, okay? So if a person is, they're dominant, they're a doer, they're a delegator, they typically would tend to be the bossy one. The one that's quick to make decisions. Like if somebody walks in and sees a mess, they're like, okay, this is what we need to do, okay? I,
Introvert.
no, close, good guess, good guess. Influencer. Okay, so this is the one that likes to be the life of the party, the social butterfly. They're always going to be the last to leave every party, and not because they're help cleaning up, but because they don't want to miss a drop of the fun. Okay, this person lives with FOMO. If anything's happening, they have to be there. Okay, and they're just always in the middle of things. Okay, sometimes they're drama queens, but they can also be like, if you need someone to go in and create energy into the space, this is going to be them. They're charismatic. They've got good energy. Okay, this is an I. S is steadiness. Okay, slow. They can be slow to make decisions. They can operate from a place where safety is key. Like they're always looking at, well, how could the bottom fall out of the situation? Okay, these are the ones that are going to be on your quality control team. They're going to make sure that everybody stays alive on the road trip. Okay, they're going to be the ones checking everyone's life jackets when you get on the boat. Okay,
The responsible
the
adult.
responsible adult. Okay,
Oh God, yes, I know that.
and this person also is the peacemaker. They're the glue, like holding things together. Okay? Now the last one is C, conscientious. Okay? This is a hard one to spell when you're typing with your thumbs. Okay, but this person also, they're calculated. They can be very critical. And critical can be in the positive and negative sense of the word. So they're going to psychoanalyze everything. They're going to be your spreadsheet people. They're also going to be the ones that are paranoid of being wrong. So you want these on any team because they're going to help make sure that the sales team, they're never going to be on the sales team, by the way. Okay? They're going to be on the execution team. And the sales team, which are going to be your I's and your D's, are going to always be at war with your S's and your C's, who are the executors. Okay? The other thing about your C personalities is that they need to know step 47 before they will agree to take step 2. Like they want to see the whole plan, whereas your eyes are like, woohoo! Someone said go to the roof? Yes! Okay? So now, obviously, we don't live in only one quadrant. Okay? We're usually a combination, but I want to tell you, when I was a new entrepreneur, before I understood these profiles, I would speak to every single employee and every member on my team as if they were me. Because that's how I was used to communicating. And it was an absolute nightmare. A nightmare. I mean, my turnover was crazy. I was constantly disappointed in everyone else, and I couldn't figure out what's the problem. Okay? You know, there's a very famous phrase, you can go faster alone, but you can go further with a team. So this DISC profile, it works amazingly in both personal and professional settings. So if you've got, coworkers, volunteers, organizations, friends, family, because think about it, what is your family if not the single most important team you'll ever build? Right? So when we start, in fact, one time I used to have, this was 20 years ago, and I had a client, and I forget her last name. Let's call her Cooper. Let's say their last name was Cooper. okay? She always referred to her family as Team Cooper, always. And it was so beautiful because people rise to the level of expectations that we breathe into the world. So her family carried this energy of we're a team and all of the subliminal messages that come along with it. It was such a beautiful thing to see. Now, what about DISC for kids? Okay, I'm gonna share with you in part of the follow-up resources that I'm gonna send out. There is a kids DISC assessment that is so, it is just, it is mind-blowing, okay? And it is an opportunity, first of all, for you to learn about your kiddos in ways that you just don't see them on a normal everyday basis. But then it's also so empowering because it allows them to learn it about themselves and to see it in each other. And then they start to do the same thing with their friends. Okay, and you could do it for all ages. I recently had my son do the same thing as a 17-year-old that you could do with a 5-year-old. Okay, and what it does is it allocates the four profiles into birds. Okay, so you have an eagle, a parrot, a dove, and an owl. Okay, and basically, it's like their animal becomes their superpower, and it allows them to really step into the best they can be by learning. It's like this gorgeous process of self-discovery. Okay, so once you learn the most important needs and drivers of your loved ones, and you really learn how they're wired. That's what we're doing here, is we're learning the code of their hard drive. Okay? Once we understand their most important needs, then we can shift our communication strategy and we're no longer talking to a wall. So then we can learn, and what happens then is we shift from a talk to creating a win-win-win situation across the board. And we learn to stop with our nagging and diarrhea of the mouth, and we learn to reposition our presentation to start with their needs in mind. And learning to communicate in a way that's in it for them. 2 days ago, I saw a meme, and it said, when neighbors walk by my house and hear me yelling, I'm not screaming at my kids or my spouse. I'm just giving a motivational speech to people who don't want to listen. Okay, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how many times is that us? Okay, but I tell you, in Mishlei, in the book of Proverbs, there are 2 verses that I always think of when I can feel myself really being triggered and want to give people a piece of my mind. Okay, the first one is Mishlei, verse 21, chapter 21, verse 9, and it says, "It is better to dwell in a corner of the housetop than with a brawling woman in a big house."
Wait, it is better to dwell.
Better to dwell in a corner of a rooftop.
Oh.
Okay? Than to live with a brawling woman in a big house. And the second one says, and this, if you're writing it down, if you care to write it down, it's chapter 27, verse 15, and it says, "A quarrelsome wife is like the constant dripping of a leaky roof." And they're so right? Oh my gosh. I know when I switch into that mode and I'm just like, and sometimes I just can't. Sometimes I just can't, and then, yeah. And then it's like, and I heard once, and I've shared this analogy many times, like, just bite your tongue until it bleeds. I'm like, I feel like Dracula. I got blood dripping because I'm not saying anything, but the subtitles are coming out my face. Like there's.
Look at my face.
Yeah,
No.
exactly. Okay. On the other hand, the Torah is a path of peace and pleasantness. Darchei Noam. So when we stop, when we take a breath and we rise above and we step back into our higher self, we go from our animal reptilian brain, right, back into our conscious functioning brain. we can then zoom out and we can think strategically instead of reactively, which of course that's what we learned, that's what we focused on in the last session. So all of these bits go together. Next session, we're gonna cover some practical tips on how to actually map out your conversations for success, okay? Now let's switch gears and let's look at the love languages. So Maytal brought this up a minute ago, that the 5 love languages, this actually was developed, 40 years ago, I think, by a man named Gary Chapman. Dr. Gary Chapman. I first learned of this methodology 23 years ago. For sure, I've been using it ever since. I will say, just as a quick disclaimer, he has some parts of his training that involve Christian doctrine. But last year, I took another course, actually a Jewish course, where Rabbanim Dayanim in Queens, the woman who created the course, got Dayanim, both Litvisha and Hasidisha Dayanim in Queens, to review everything in the course and everything from the 5 love languages. And they all approved it because the roots of this methodology are very biblical and not Christian, okay? But the 5 love languages, just in case you're not familiar with them, I'm gonna share them with you quickly, okay? And why I'm gonna share this with you is because in this Jewish course, she introduced 2 new languages, which I thought were hilarious, okay? So first language is acts of service. Second love language is receiving gifts. Third love language is quality time. So acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time. Fourth is words of affirmation. And 5 is physical touch. And like I said, the Jewish course that I took actually added 2 more languages. Number 6 is my favorite, food. Okay. Right? So Jewish, okay? And number 7 was empathy. Okay, now there is an excellent free quiz online that is for people of all ages. And I'll share the link to the quiz as part of the follow-up resources. Okay, and again, most people are a combination of these languages. And we do, in fact, need all 7 sprinkled in the relationship for the relationship to thrive. However, usually we have 1 primary and 1 secondary. So if we focus the bulk there, then the rest can show up more casually and naturally. Okay? But the point is knowing your own language so you know what you need to do to keep your cup full, and then knowing the language of your loved ones to keep their bucket full. Otherwise, you could be filling your kid's bucket with hugs all day long when what they really need is words of praise. So their bucket then feels empty to them. But they don't know that. They didn't take the quiz. They don't know that. Okay? So let's wrap up and summarize for today. Very, very important to remember. Nobody is expecting us to master these concepts overnight. Okay? And we don't need to. These are tools that we add to our arsenal as we continue to learn and grow, which is a constant, lifelong work. Our objective here, your objective, is leading your family in the way it should go. Who decides should? You. Okay? Hopefully this is a conversation you have with your spouse. My husband and I have a family strategy planning session once a year. We do a staycation, not so hard now because we're surprise empty nesters, but we used to have to work hard to get away from the businesses and away from the kids and have a time where we could be either we got rid of the kids or we went to a hotel for a couple days or something, and we mapped out, we made sure we were on the same page. Now, interestingly enough, for those of you who have taken this course from me, this exercise is not 50-50. It's not meant to be. This exercise was usually me mapping out everything I thought I wanted, putting it on the paper, inviting my husband to the getaway and saying, hey, what do you think about this? Hey, what do you think about this? What? And he's like, oh, sounds great. And then guess what? He's agreed, which means he helped create it. And he would add few things. He always had good input. But if I was expecting him to have the conversation or do the heavy lifting, it's not going to happen. Because that's not, there's two halves of a whole. Our sages teach us that you have one whole neshama. You're split into two, and when you come together under the chuppah, you're reuniting. And it's not always a man role and a female role, but there are certain things that are stereotypical in that situation. And so you can decide in your family which one is going to be the planner. It's usually the woman, but not always. Not always. Okay? But remember, you are the Eshes Chayil. You're the woman of valor. And you are taking your job as a leader of your household, your team, very seriously. And as a result of that, you're committed to learning new skills and a new approach to life that empowers you to lead with passion, with purpose, and with joy. We know that every journey begins with a single step. Go back and ask yourself, how much of the energy in your home right now is infused with passion? How much is infused with purpose? How much is infused with joy? Who's the thermostat in your home? You, right? You can control based on your energetic state, which reminds us again, where does the work begin? With me. The work is with me. It's so exhausting. It never ends. And we know that the work on ourselves is the most difficult and the most rewarding work we will ever do. Mm-hmm. So we're not going to get overwhelmed with the tasks. We're not going to get sucked into the microwave mentality. We know you're a crock pot, sister. Okay? Slow and steady wins the race. No! Every now and then, you got to turn the pot up for a quick boil? Yes. Sometimes we have to. Sometimes we got to fry the onions before we put them in the crock pot because we got to get it going. We got to get it started. Okay? There's nothing wrong with that. But over the long haul, it's the long distance runner that wins because the sprinters don't have the endurance. Okay, so we have to train ourselves for the long haul. So let's talk about our action items this week. Okay, these are your digging deeper tasks, your mission, should you choose to accept them. Okay, first of all, I am going to challenge you sometime in the next 2 weeks. Try your absolute best to have a fun date night with your kids. Okay, it can be a whole family date night. Okay, but it can be pizza, popcorn, it can be breakfast for dinner, who cares? Okay, whatever will make it fun for your household. And have them take the kids' disc assessment together. Okay, you help them through it, but give them the assessment and it will become a fun family activity. Okay, that's mission number 1. Number 2 is to do a version of that with your spouse. Okay? If you want to have a date night, great. If you just want to have an hour together after the kids are in bed, a cup of tea, a glass of wine, whatever. And there is a free version I'm going to give you for a personality test, DISC personality for adults. Well, it doesn't say for adults. It's meant for adults. The other one is specifically for kids, okay? And then the last one is take your own love languages quiz. Okay? If you can get your kids to do the love language quiz on the same night, just get them to do both quizzes at the same night, easy. Just depends on how much their attention span. I think the quiz, if I remember correctly, is 30 questions for the 5 love languages. And they say on the site, it's a nonprofit site, and they say over there that the quiz is for kids, adults, everyone. So you'll be able to gauge based on your kiddos' ages if you think they can handle it. What I've seen a lot of moms do, they take it with their kids. So they'll let the kid ask the questions, and if the kid doesn't understand, the mom will rephrase it until the kid understands it, and then it helps them And then it was very cute. I had one mom that she went back, and so the daughter took the test. They printed the report, and then the mom took the daughter held her report. And then the daughter asked the mom the questions of what she thought the daughter would answer. So the mom was guessing, like, how well did she know the daughter based on where the daughter answered. And she said they got a few of them wrong, but for the most part, she definitely knew her kid, which obviously we do, right? So the takeaway, again, as much as we hate to swallow this pill every week, the work is with me. I'm a never-ending, ever-evolving piece of artwork on the canvas. And, the best analogy I ever heard about this as we wrap up is that if you look at the canvas from behind, it doesn't look very pretty. All we see is dark splotches here or there, or nails and bolts, or thread that has come through. And it's because we're looking as we're watching, as Hashem is the one with the canvas, right? And we're sitting over here being, we like, oh, you're working on me more. And we're looking at the backside, and it doesn't look pretty. But at the end, when we can turn it over and see the whole big picture, it's stunning. It's literally a work of art. And that's, again, where it comes to us trusting the process. So next time, session 5, we are going to cover 3 skills that we need to affect long-term sustainable relationships. We've got 2 sessions left. And in these last 2 sessions, it's going to be a lot of pulling all the pieces together now that we've got the foundation laid. So next session, 2 weeks from now, is 3 skills that we need to create long-term sustainable results with our relationships. Sound good?
Yep.
Okay, bye everybody. Yay, go team.